man from what I see. I wish I had a good man like Papoose. Remy might not want Papoose back, and he done moved in with his new girlfriend. Now she got.
Although it appeared to be a typical day, Remy saw it as the start of a storm that would rock her to her core. He waited there without flinching, as though she were imprisoned in an unseen cage from which she was unable to break free. The streets of New York were filled with the usual mayhem, with horns honking and people hurrying by in a never-ending stream. Beneath it all, however, there was a terrible force that was simmering and about to explode. Remy was a powerful figure in the rap industry, strong, self-sufficient, and unstoppable. She had used talent, guts, and unwavering resolve to claw her way to the top. However, none of that would protect her from the fallout from a single rash choice on this particular day. She and Vanessa had a dreamlike beginning to their relationship. Vanessa appeared to be everything Remy had ever desired: vibrant, confident, and stunning. Their bond was ideal, unbreakable, passionate, and vibrant for a while. But the shine dimmed with time. This love felt less like a sanctuary and more like a battleground for someone like Remy, who was used to commanding respect and keeping control. Tension simmered until it boiled over as minor arguments turned into yelling confrontations. One disagreement that resulted from miscommunication, drinks, and hidden fears turned into something far deeper. She became enraged and lost all ability to think clearly. The hands that had previously created songs that captivated audiences now betrayed her, lashing out with uncontrollable rage. Ray's anger erupted brutally in a moment that would alter everything. As her rage erupted, the room seemed to contract, the walls pressing in. The sound of Vanessa's body striking the wall reverberated throughout the cramped room. Remy's thoughts were racing with uncontrollable emotion, her chest heaving and her breathing labored. Vanessa was caught in a maelstrom she didn't understand, shaking and gasping for oxygen as she tried to regain her equilibrium. Something raw, unadulterated, and terrifying had taken the place of the self-confident, passionate Remy that she had assumed she knew. Remy spat, "You're not ready for this," in a cold, harsh voice devoid of logic. It wasn't a plea or a warning. It was unadulterated, all-consuming rage. Unchecked emotions erupted, making Vanessa the helpless victim of a storm that had been quietly brewing for years. Vanessa was overcome by fear, her body trembling and her veins pounding with adrenaline as she struggled to get free. Then it took place. She let out a scream. It cut through the tension and broke the illusion that nothing could stay the same. It was heartbreakingly raw. Clarity hit Remy like a hammer in that moment. She was out of breath due to the pressure of her activities on her chest. She could see the fear in Vanessa's eyes. It was a terror she had never experienced before. The magnitude of what she had done struck her for the first time. Vanessa had been deceived by the hands that had once held her affectionately. The hands that wrote the stirring lyrics have caused irreversible suffering. Remy's well-made armor was cracked. She was left staring at the fallout from an unchangeable moment, as the barriers of control she had erected around herself collapsed. As Vanessa struggled with a reality she could no longer deny, her body shook against the wall, her breathing was irregular, and her eyes were wide with terror.
Vanessa and Remy had spoken to each other. Words became more explosive and acute. Tensions rapidly increased as the evening went on. Years of repressed rage, stress, and hidden grievances caused what started out as an argument to escalate into a fight. Witnesses and sources claimed that within minutes, the situation descended into violence. Both women were unable to control the force of their emotions as they exploded. The flashing lights of emergency vehicles, conjecture on social media, and national television headlines would shortly depict what transpired. Tension and terror pervaded the flat by the time the police arrived. Shouting, crashes, and unexpected frightening noises were reported by neighbors, who immediately called 911. In sharp contrast to the bustle of everyday urban life, sirens cut through the city's streets. Officers moved into the flat and took control of the area. The aftermath of what had happened was illuminated by red and blue lights that bounced off the walls. Handcuffs clamped around Remy's wrists, and she was so overwhelmed and emotionally raw that she hardly noticed the demands, the warnings, and the cold steel. It was an unquestionable moment of actuality. As the pandemonium of the night started to solidify into something irrevocable, the weight of consequences started to set in. It was a terrible event for Vanessa. She had seen a side of Remy that very few people had ever seen, a genuine, unadulterated rage that appeared nearly inhuman in its ferocity. She attempted to understand how the lady she had known, even respected, could change in such a horrifying moment as she clutched herself, trembled, and gasped for oxygen. The dread in her eyes and the way she moved turned into a terrifying image that would later make the rounds on social media and news sites. Remy's world appeared to fall apart as she was taken into custody. The music, the legacy, the respect, and the empire she had laboriously constructed over decades all felt brittle and susceptible to one disastrous event. Almost instantly, social media took off. Platforms were inundated with responses ranging from disbelief to outrage from fans, critics, and casual spectators. There was little space for nuance or comprehension as headlines shouted accusations, rumors, and conjecture. Even people who had long respected her for her fortitude and tenacity had to face the truth. The public narrative surrounding her life was now characterized by a single angry episode. The arrest was made quickly, decisively, and firmly. Remy, who was renowned for her poise and control, was suddenly at the whim of uncontrollable forces. The incident dominated news cycles in the days that followed. The nature of the relationship, the psychological factors that might have led to the altercation, and the reasons behind the fight were all discussed by analysts. Insiders in the music business commented, emphasizing the irony of a woman whose career had been built on strength and resiliency being undermined by a private moment of fragility. It was a life-changing experience for Remy. It made her deal with the intangible as well as the tangible. The legal ramifications, the public scrutiny, and the broken relationships. The ways that even the most solid foundation could be compromised by rage, unbridled passion, and unresolved personal conflict. New York streets are constantly awake. Life accelerates at an unrelenting speed. Horns blare and people dash by in a chaotic swirl. However, time appeared to stand still in a quiet Manhattan flat. Fans, the media, and the general public would be shocked by what transpired inside those walls, which would shortly rock the music industry. The renowned rapper Remy Ma, who is renowned for her tenacity, strength, and supremacy in the business, was put in a position that would change both her life and her profession. Remy had always been a formidable opponent. She had overcome every challenge with unwavering tenacity, rising from the streets to the top of the rap world. Her name was a byword for tenacity, fortitude, and unparalleled skill. She had experienced personal struggles, legal disputes, and rivalries. Nevertheless, she consistently came out stronger. But even a strong lady like Remy was susceptible to the human weaknesses that can surface when emotions get out of hand. Vanessa, the new person in Remy's life, was at the heart of this maelstrom. Vanessa was a presence that was impossible to ignore. She was vibrant, self-confident, and bold without apology. The two women first had informal, almost pleasant conversations. But as time went on, conflicts started to fester beneath the surface. Miscommunications, unsaid complaints, and the demands of personal history converged in ways that neither lady could have predicted. The incident started out like any other day. The stress growing behind closed doors was concealed by the vibrant energy of New York. Remy and Vanessa had a small argument that quickly got out of hand. Words that would have appeared insignificant to others became triggers, reigniting emotions that had been building for weeks. Long restrained by self-control and focus, Remy's temper erupted in a moment that would permanently change the trajectory of her life. The neighbors called 911 immediately after hearing loud shouts, crashes, and startling noises. The flat was in disarray when police arrived. The area was filled with sharp shadows as red and blue lights bounced off the walls. There was no denying the police's presence as they entered with authority. They yelled commands. Remy was so overcome with emotion that she hardly paid attention to what they were saying. She felt a sudden jolt of reality when the cold steel shackles snapped around her wrists. She had encountered difficulties in the past, but never in this way or with such definitive and overwhelming consequences.
Vanessa found it difficult to understand the issue because she was caught up in the chaos. Her body shook as she tried to regain control, and fear was evident in every move she made. She had seen Remy in a variety of contexts: the survivor, the fighter, the artist. However, this was something quite different. It was pure, unadulterated rage that was devoid of reason or reasoning. She clutched herself as she attempted to comprehend the upheaval in her life. After being taken into custody, Remy had to face the consequences of her conduct. After years of brilliance, tenacity, and hard work, the empire she had built felt brittle and susceptible to a single disastrous event. Both supporters and detractors responded quickly. There was a flurry of conjecture, denunciation, and incredulity on social media. There was no room for nuance in the headlines, which shouted accusations, rumors, and suspicions. Even people who had respected her for her strength had to face the fact that the public perception of her life may be shaped by a single outburst of rage. The incident caused intense discussions in the music industry. The pressures of celebrity, the complexities of interpersonal relationships, and the psychological effects of a life spent fighting for respect were all examined as analysts analyzed the events. The irony was observed by many. A woman who had triumphed in innumerable battles was now up against a foe she was unable to defeat. Attorneys and legal professionals offered their opinions, talking about potential accusations, prospective results, and the impact on Remy's career. Remy struggled with the personal consequences, while everyone else looked on. Broken relationships, public scrutiny, and the unsettling realization that one uncontrolled emotional episode had had irreversible consequences. It was a traumatic experience for Vanessa. Few people had ever seen the side of Remy that she had been compelled to see. Long after the sirens stopped and the media frenzy subsided, the fear, bewilderment, and astonishment would still be present. In those moments, her eyes were wide with fear.